So, have you ever struggled with creating habits that are actually worth sticking to? Or have you had trouble actually sticking to habits or finding ones that actually make you want to perform rather than, I know for me, thinking about habits just in general kind of makes me want to run the opposite direction? Well, if so, I literally have something that you need to hear today. And that is, we are going to be diving into Atomic Habits by James Clear. There you go. Can you see it? This is a super powerful book. And the reason why I want to dive into this is because the difference between successful and or consistent and inconsistent people are consistent people have found a way to actually effortlessly add habits into their life and do it in a way that doesn't require them to use discipline or to force themselves to actually get themselves to show up. Now, the master of habits, honestly, is James Clear. I've read many, many different books that have to do with habit creation, and the most simplest, easiest one has been this book. I would highly suggest that you go out and buy it. I actually will leave you the link inside of the show notes for you to grab it. It is an affiliate link, by the way. But this book is truly a game changer. But how about if you're either wanting to review the book, you're wanting to like have a quick summary because you've already read the book, or you're trying to wonder if like this really is the book for you, or maybe you're just not a reader and you would rather just hear somebody like break it down in a summary. That is what today's video is all about. I am super pumped up about this because, like I said, this is the best book that I've ever found about making like tiny little adjustments that make huge differences in your life and doing it in a way that doesn't feel like terrible, like it sucks, like I hate habits. No, he actually finds a way of getting us to perform habits on an entirely different level without having to force ourselves to do that all the time. All right. So that being said, this is actually going to be a live call. So as we're going, if you're here, first off, let me know where you're coming from, where you're dialing in from. I don't know why I always say that. But if you are watching this in the recording, I also appreciate you for being here and watching this. But we're going to use the next couple of weeks to go over some really key, powerful leadership books. First one, Atomic Habits. We're going to probably go into Extreme Ownership, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership from John Maxwell, and probably the last one was Unf Yourself by Gary John Bishop. So if you're somebody who enjoys books, you want to find a great summary. I like to call it like a book breakdown where somebody can get very laser focused into the chapters so that you get like the best stuff from the books. That's what we're going to be doing here for the next couple of weeks. All right. So welcome, guys, to Modern Leadership, where we see things differently. We help busy parents like succeed professionally and personally without having to sacrifice their family time or without burning themselves out. And how we do that is Monday and Thursdays, we have shorter videos. And usually during the weekend, on Fridays, we have longer videos, which are going to be including these book reviews. Now, if you are new to the channel, consider subscribing, especially if you enjoy this book review today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be going through this book really quickly. I'm going to not be hitting every single chapter. I'm going to hit like the key components of this book. As we go, if there's a part of it that like spoke louder to you, maybe you read it, maybe you're somebody who wants to give some input, definitely please comment that in the comments below. So as we go, we can get some feedback from you. But also, I want to let you know that this is only a summary. I'm not going to be reading the entire book. Can you imagine how long it would take me on a live recording to read the entire book? All right. I want you to use this, whether it's in bits and pieces. And after we're done here, I'll go back, break this up into chapters so that you guys can actually see chapter 1, chapter 3, chapter 5, and really just fast forward to that if that's something you want to do in the future. But I also want you to have this one-stop shop so we can get in here, get this book read, and get into creating these incredible habits in our life that will make a huge difference, okay? All right, so let's jump right in, all right? So chapter number 1 is called The Surprising Power of Atomic Habits. This is where like it literally changed the game for me, and I'm going to read something specifically that he talks about that is the most powerful thing that you really need to lean into for the remainder of this book. And it's like too often we convince ourselves that massive action or massive success requires massive action. Whether it's losing weight, building a business, writing a book, winning a championship, or achieving any goal, we put pressure on ourselves to make some earth-shattering improvement that everyone will talk about. Meanwhile, improving by 1% isn't particularly noble. Sometimes it isn't even noticeable, but it can be far more meaningful, especially in the long run. The difference in tiny improvements can make over time is astounding. What he talks about in the first chapter is the basis for the whole rest of the book. Habits, small habits, over time will literally compound into massive results in your life. That's why, if you see in the screenshot of this video, is get 37 times better. He actually has a little bit of an equation here. What would happen if you get 1% better every single day for the entire year? Now, 1% better is not a huge thing. It's like the difference between, like, instead of grabbing a burger, grabbing a salad. It's the difference between skipping your workout and I don't know, taking the stairs instead. That's only 1%. But if you compound it 1% every day, you become 37 times like more productive, not more productive, but even better by being and improving yourself every single day by 1%. But if you do the opposite, if you get 1% worse every day, which I think is like you're either growing or you're not growing. People like to say dying, but like you're either one or the other. You're not staying flatline. And so you're either getting better or you're getting worse. And if you get 1% worse every day, by the end, it's almost like negligible. Like it's a huge, obviously, difference between that and by being 37 times better. And it's these small 1% better things that really do matter. In the book, he talks about this to really describe it. He says, let's say that you have an ice cube, all right? And it's in an environment that's 26 degrees. It goes up, like let's say they're trying to heat the room up from 26 to 27. Nothing happens to the ice cube. It's still the same. 28, 29, 30, 31. And then what happens between 31 to 32? At 32, the ice cube starts to melt. Now, you may start to wonder, like, well, what time was it? Was it the last one from 31 to 32? Or was it all the small ones that built up every single time in totality that created this massive change? And that is what habits is like. It's like creating a system where you have these 1% increments, and every day, before you know it, you're going to wake up a year later and you're going to be like, my entire life has changed. Personally, that's what happened to me. That's how I lost 100 pounds. That's how I succeeded in my police career, in business, all these things. It's like that 1% better every single day. And I know we want it to be sexy, we want it to be overnight, but that's not really truly where we will see the most success. It's the small actions that we take and the small habits and the systems that we can plug into that will get us to have massive success. And so he says, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So even when you have a goal, reverse engineering that into the habits that those goals have, which is why in almost every single program I have, I talk a lot about tracking or either having a tracker or following something so that you can start to do those things just like habits and really allow you to achieve those goals. Instead of just having the really big goals, you got to think about what's the system that I'm following in order to achieve that. All right. So if you want better results, then forget about setting goals as much as focusing on your system instead. That's what James said, all right? And that is chapter number 1. Chapter number 2, how your habits shape your identity. What he talks about is true behavior change is identity. The goal is not to read a book. The goal is to be a reader. The goal is not to lose weight. The goal is to become like a health and fitness enthusiast. The goal is not to make money. The goal is to become a business owner who's capable of making money. In this process, your identity actually comes and emerges out of your habits. So if you're consistently growing, I remember hearing this once where it was somebody who was like trying to quit smoking, and they identified themselves as a smoker who was trying to quit smoking. It's a lot different when somebody comes up to you and offers you a cigarette or offers you a drink if you're a drinker who's trying to stop drinking. But when you step into it and you're like, no, I just don't drink, it's an entirely different situation, right? And how you do that is every time that you have a habit that you perform is it's like a little check mark in your life about, yep, that's the type of person I am. Yep, that's the type of person I am. That's the type of person I am. So that way, when you build all of these successful things that you're doing these small actions all the time, you just become the type of person that does that automatically. I was actually on a master coach call and actually a podcast even just before that this morning talking about this. Because a lot of people, like let's say they want $1 million business, or they want to be able to, be totally ripped and have a six pack, or they want to be able to lose 100 pounds, but they don't realize that it's the small habits that they do that they have to that helps them become the type of person that can have that success once they get it. If I were to hand you $1 million business, what would you do with it? Like, would you know how to continue to make $1 million? Or would you be like, I don't know the habits that it takes for me to actually develop and become a $1 million business owner? And that's a part of the process. It's these small little changes, these small little habits that you develop that you like over time, you massage them, you change them, they get upgraded, right? And as you do that, you just become and take on the identity of that person who already has that thing. So instead of thinking about yourself as a somebody who reads a book, or somebody who is like writing some papers, like you're trying to become the type of person who is a writer. You're trying to become a type of person who's a reader. You're becoming the person that's an author. And how you do that is every habit that you do, you put a check mark in your box, in your brain of like, yep, this is me, this is me, this is me, and it becomes your identity. And when you can have that identity, when you can create that by the habits that you're taking, you just become the type of person that does that already. And then when you get $1 million business, you keep it. And when you lose 50 pounds, you keep it off, right? And when you become the type of father or husband that you truly want to be, you become that person just naturally. It's just something you naturally do, right? I was talking to my coaches today too. And like in the beginning, it takes some time, right? It does take some discipline. It does take some work towards it. But all those times you're actually building up into the type of person that can succeed in that area. It's the same with coaching. Like for me, coaching happens second nature. Like when my son or my kids or my wife or somebody else that I'm talking to, I'm watching a presentation, I can actually, it's like my brain flows through my coaching framework, right? It flows through what I call the push method. It flows through like belief drives behavior because I've done it so many times and I've built up the habit that I'm not coaching. I'm just me. I'm the coach. It's just, it flows through my operating system. But that happens by taking those little habits and taking them and making them, or taking those actions to create that kind of habit over time. And then it just becomes a part of your identity. Now you might be wondering, like, how do I create that? We're going to get into that right now. But by the way, as we're going, let me know if you're enjoying this video, because I will do more like this, more book reviews. Make sure you like the video so that way I have an idea of whether or not you think I should continue to do this in this live format or doing it in a pre-recorded format, all right? All right, so chapter number 3. Chapter number 3 is how to build better habits in 4 steps. He says habits don't restrict freedom, they create it. So habits actually allow you to create freedom, all right? Now, he breaks this down into 4 different steps. I'm going to talk to you about it right now of how a habit actually works. So number 1 is the cue. It's something that we see outside, all right? It could be maybe like when let's say you see, or somebody says something very specific to you and it just reminds you of something that happened. You see your water, you see there's a cue that kind of tells you and reminds you, oh, hey, it's time. You wake up in the morning, right? And you're like, oh, every time I walk over to the counter and I start brushing my teeth. The cue is the first thing that kind of like starts that. It's the thing that's usually visible that reminds you of like, oh, here's the time for this to happen, or here's the time for this not to happen. The next piece is a craving. So you get a craving for doing that thing. Sometimes it's a craving for what's going to be at the end. Sometimes it's a craving for a reward that you're going to get a little bit later, but there's a craving to want to do that thing. And a lot of times it's automatic after we do it enough times, right? The third piece is the response. The response is we go out there and we do it. We go out there and we take action on it. We go out there and we wake up. We go out there, we brush our teeth. We do those things that we are getting the cue and the craving for. And the fourth one is the reward. The reward can be like a dopamine hit. It could be that you're able to achieve that. It could be you have brushed teeth. It could be that whatever that whole habit is, all right? So you have these 4 steps: the cue, the craving, the response, and the reward. So let's say, for example, I wake up and it's time for me to work out, right? So the cue is like, oh, hey, it's this time. This is the time that I get up and that I work out, all right? The craving is like, yes, I want to go work out so that I can prove to the world that this is important to me, all right? So I'm going to go out there and I'm going to exercise. The third thing is I get the response. The response, I go out there, I work out, I finish it up, and at the end I get a reward because it's a dopamine hit of like, I did what I said I was going to do. I'm continuing to work on my health. And this is how those kind of like habits work, all right? Now, how you create a good habit is we use this cue, craving, response, and reward. We kind of like reframe like how, like not only the habits that we want to perform, but I'll talk to you in a minute about the habits that you don't want to perform. So there's ways that you can do it so that you can make yourself more, that you want to actually perform these habits, all right? So the first one is make it obvious. So if there's something that you want to do, let's say you want to drink more water, you should put water in front of you, because every time you look at it, that's your cue. Oh, I got to drink more water, right? if you want to, like, let's say you want to floss your teeth, right? You're like, I want to floss my teeth more. Well, where is it a place? Where can you place it so that you can see it and remind yourself to do it, right? So if you constantly in the morning time go over and brush your teeth or do whatever, maybe you put the floss out on the counter so you can see it. So you're reminded, oh, hey, it's time to blush. It's time to floss my teeth. Next one is craving, and that is make it attractive. So make that thing attractive, whether it's something you remind yourself of what you're fighting for, why you're doing that thing, the impact that it's going to make when you do that. You find ways to actually make it more attractive to you rather than thinking about the time or the energy or whatever it's going to take from you. You think about the other things that actually attract you to get after it, all right? And the fourth one is reward, make it satisfying. So I know this is a big one, like really reminding yourself of why you're doing this habit and the results that this is going to create. And yes, it may not be like instant gratification right now, but knowing that you're heading in the direction of success, that for me is a lot of reward because it's something it gives me that mental dopamine hit. Even like, guys, even checking a box on your to-do list, that can even be satisfying. I know my son says this all the time. It's so satisfying when I get to check the boxes of this thing, right? Saying I did it, I finished this, right? And maybe that's your version of making it satisfying. So what you can do is if you make it obvious, make it more attractive, make it easy to do, and make it satisfying when you do it, that's how you're going to continue to perform the habits that you want to perform. And actually, that's how you create a habit. You do that so many times that before you know it, it just becomes automatic. You don't have to think about these things anymore. It's just now you get up and you go over there and you floss your teeth, even if the floss isn't on the counter because you've done it so many times that now it's just a normal part of your life. Now, how can you invert these so that you can actually break a bad habit? Well, remember, these four things are always going. So the cue, the craving, the response, and the reward are always going, right? And so what he says, first off, is instead of making it visible, do the opposite. Make it invisible. So if you're trying to lose weight and you know that there's something when it's in your house that you have no control over it, then what you do is you make it invisible. You put it somewhere else. You throw it away. You don't have it in your house. You make it so that it's not it's not on the open, so that you're not reminded about it to do it every single time. Because otherwise, if you have Coke and you know that Coke is like your demise, when you see it, guess what's going to happen? The cue is going to be you see it. The craving is going to be like, oh my God, it's going to taste so delicious when I have it. And then you're going to go over and you're going to take action on it, right? Because that's your response is I'm going to walk over, I'm going to grab it, and then I'm going to drink it. And the reward is like, this tastes so good, right? And then afterwards, you're going to beat yourself up about it because it's not in alignment with what your goals are, right? And so think about, what can I do to remove or make invisible the cue, the thing that like reminds me to do that habit if I don't want to do that habit anymore? The next one is, how do you make it, instead of attractive, how do you make it unattractive? How do you make it harder to do is the next one, is how do you make it more difficult? And the last one is, how do you make it not satisfying? So how do you make it so that, like, I mean, you could even think of something like this. We'll probably talk about it in a few minutes. This is another great chapter from this book is if you don't want to do something, how about telling the outside world that you don't want to do it? And that if you do it, you're going to have to give money to a charity that you don't want to give to. And so what you're doing there is you're making it unattractive. You maybe might be making it more difficult for you to do that thing because you don't want to have to, do those things. And you're making it unsatisfying because you actually don't want to give to this charity, right? And so figuring out like ways of that you can do this, whether you want to do a good habit and you want to make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying, or you want to do the opposite where you want to make it invisible, make it unattractive, make it difficult, or make it unsatisfying. All right. That is how that habit creation process is created. And by the way, dive into the book in that chapter. It's a little bit more deep in depth if you're somebody who is looking to start new habits or remove those old ones. Now, we are going to go into a little bit more depth as we go on these same topics, but that was like the framework that we had to set so that we can go into the other ones. All right. So chapter number 5 is the best way to start a new habit. So what he says is getting clear and having an implementation intention is important. Most people never just sit down and set the intention. I will do this, whatever that action or behavior is going to be, at this time, in this location. So just being very specific. So when I wake up, I will exercise at 3:00 in the morning inside of the garage. And setting that intention is really, really powerful, because then you can start using different things to stack on top of it in a second. But you're very sure when it's going to happen, where it's going to happen, and what's going to happen. It's kind of like this whole idea of like creating a plan. If you create it beforehand and you're like, okay, this is going to happen at this time and at this location, it gives you like the framework to not go, oh, well, I don't know, and kind of like get a little bit vague about it. It just gets you to make the implementation intention just saying, this is going to happen. This is when it's going to happen, and this is where it's going to happen. And even that sometimes is just enough. But also what you can do is you can do what's called habit stacking. So habit stacking. So if you want to start a new habit, all right, and let's say that you want to get up and you want to exercise every single day for 30 minutes, right? You're going to exercise every day, Monday through Friday, for 30 minutes in the garage at this time, all right? So you've set that intention. Now you want to ask yourself, what are some habits that I have right now that I can actually marry up with the idea of exercising? So maybe like every morning you wake up and you read a book. And then what your thing is going to be is like, after I read my book, then I'm going to exercise. So after I read my book, then I'm going to exercise. If reading your book is something you do every single day, it will be much easier to stack those two together because you're like, after my book, I exercise. After my book, I exercise. If you're just starting with this one, sometimes that can be super hard. So that's why it's easier if you marry it up to something else. Like example, what I said is like, if you're brushing your teeth and you're like, I need to floss more, we'll put the floss right next to it so you can see it, right? But then you're going to be like, okay, after I brush my teeth, I floss. Actually, I think it's supposed to be in reverse. After I floss, then I brush my teeth. However you rearrange that, if you can stack those habits, something that you do already automatically with something else that you want to do, it will remind you, it'll be that cue for you. Oh yeah, I just did this. Now it's time to do this. All right. That was chapter number 5. Chapter number 6 is motivation is overrated. Environment often matters more. I love this one because this is literally what I do. And it's like designing your environment for success. If you want to create massive results, make sure that you are like very particular about the environment that you're in, all right, and how you set up your environment. This means if you have an environment where you want to drink more water, put more water out. If you want to have an environment that you don't drink so much, whatever, or eat whatever, like create an environment where you don't have that anymore, right? And even the people that you surround yourself with can be that environment, right? So when we think about that, like, how can I make it easier for me to perform my exercise program today? So for me, I'm like, okay, a couple things I can do. Number 1 is I can get my pre-workout early. Number 2 is I can put my clothes out on the table. So as soon as I wake up, I know, oh, hey, there's my clothes. It's time to get my workout on. By the way, I don't do that. I actually already sleep in my workout clothes. I'm like way ahead of that. Teresa doesn't like me that I sleep like that with my workout clothes on. But that's what I do because it's just so much easier. But if you have like your pre-workout, you have like your exercise gear, maybe you even buy some new shoes because you're super excited about new shoes, right? Maybe that's your reward. Maybe your reward is, hey, I'm going to start doing this. And when I go out and exercise, my reward is I get to wear those new shoes that I just bought. See how this kind of works? And when you set up your environment for that kind of level of success, you're good to go. Maybe you have a business. Well, do you have a business space? Do you have like a new laptop that you have? Do you have like, I mean, what is it that you can do to actually create that environment for success? Are you hanging out with other people who are also getting after it with their health and fitness? Are you hanging out with people who are also creating a business? Like when you do that, you actually set yourself up for success because it just becomes a natural part of the environment to take those actions that you want to take and to not take the actions that you don't want to take because you make it invisible, okay? Chapter number 7 is the secret to self-control. And that is like avoiding temptations that trigger bad habits. Remember that a cue always starts the process of a habit. So want to drink more water, make it visible. Want to drink less water, make it invisible, right? So if you're not drinking enough water, maybe you're taking this the opposite direction where it's not visible to you. And because it's invisible, you're not able to do it, all right? So really use the secret to self-control of like your visual cues. Hearing, seeing, like tasting, all those kind of things. Any of those cues can be that reminder to either do that thing or to not do that thing. So make sure that you understand that the secret to self-control is not like forcing yourself to do it. It's just creating that environment and setting yourself up for success that way. All right. Chapter number 8 is make a habit irresistible. So pair something you love to do with something that you need to do. So thinking about like, after I do this current thing, maybe something that you love to do, I will do this thing that I don't love to do. Or in reverse, I will do this thing, which is usually the hard thing. And once I do this hard thing, then I will do this other thing that I really love, that I really enjoy. When you pair those two up, it's like it's powerful because it will get you to get through the hard one to get to the fun one, or to do the fun one so that you can get to the hard one. I like the other way around, where I do something like difficult, like they say they eat that frog, like get out there, do the most difficult thing first, and then I reward myself by doing this other habit over here. All right. So doing this habit stacking this way, where you have a habit that you love to do and a habit that you need to do. Even that word, I hate using that word. But those two things, when you have those and you pair them up together, where you get to do one, that you get to do the other one, it really is a great stack with one another. All right. Chapter number 9, the role of family and friends in shaping your habits. It's probably my most favorite things. So we tend to imitate 3 very specific social groups. Number 1 is our family, our close friends and family. Number 2 is the tribe that we're hanging out with, the people at work, all that kind of stuff. And number 3 is like, he refers to them as the powerful, the people who have things that you want, the people that you look up to, maybe like the John Maxwells, maybe the Simon Sinek's, maybe the people out there who are like just getting after it. So we have our family and friends. We have the tribe that you hang out with that maybe aren't necessarily family or friends. I mean, it could just be, for me, a police officer, be the person that's in the SWAT car with me that day. Or number 3 is like the powerful, the people that we really look up to and we like to follow along with. So one of the most effective ways that you can build better habits is to make sure that you're taking charge of those things, that you're joining a culture where your desired behavior, the habits that you're taking, are just a normal behavior for the people that you're surrounding yourself with. Can we do that all the time with family and friends? No, but we can minimize sometimes when there are family and friends that we hang out with that we realize that we start taking on bad habits. Like, how many of you guys have that, where before you know it, like you're hanging out with certain people and you start to emulate and start taking on those same bad habits that you have, that you don't want to actually take, right? And the same as vice versa works too. Like, you start hanging out with other people who want to get after it, who have the same goals as you, who have similar values as you. It's so much easier to perform those actions, right? And so realizing that, hey, I can actually choose, like, and make sure that I'm very specific about who it is that I hang out with. And I love talking about this. I could talk about this all day because it's the power of the 3 level of reach, like we teach. Is like you have to constantly be reaching out to people who are on the same level as you, but also reaching up to like a mentor. And when you have this, you can actually continue to take those actions and you do those habits because it's just natural behavior for the people that you're hanging out with. All right. So that's chapter number 9. Chapter number 10 is how to find and fix causes of your bad habits. This one is going to be one that's right up my wheelhouse. I actually have a video. I will probably link to it a little bit later. It talks about like how leaders speak. The words that leaders use will either motivate the crap out of people or they will demotivate them and get them to run the opposite direction. When you don't understand the specific words that you're using, you can literally like demotivate an entire room because of how you're speaking. You probably have leaders or managers probably who have done that, where you know whenever they talk, it just seems like everybody feels like there's like no energy in the room anymore, right? And it's because of the language they use. When we talk about like fixing the causes of your bad habits, some of those can be even like word changes. When you have to do something, it's much different than when you get to do it, right? I mean, you can kind of feel that, right? And I don't want you to use that as a way of shame or guilting yourself, but just even reframe it. When you're like, oh my gosh, I have to go to work today. And when you think about that a second, you're like, wait, actually, I don't. Like many people would wish they're in this current situation, right? I get to do something like this. It kind of gives you the power, as long as you're not using it to beat yourself up and you're more using it like, okay, let's reframe this. It gives you that power because you have that ownership over your life again, all right? And when you have that level of ownership, then you can go out there and get after it like you want to, all right? So instead of having to exercise, thinking about how you get to exercise can literally just reframe what it is that you're currently struggling with, all right? Chapter 11 is walk slowly, but never backward. I love this one. He says habits form based on frequency, not time. I remember he has in the book, he has this guy lost a ton of weight. And what he initially got the guy to do is is to get up, get his clothes on, call an Uber or a taxi, I think at the time, drive him to the gym. He would spend 5 minutes there, and then he would get back in the car and come home. And the guy was like, 5 minutes? Like, that's not going to be helpful. And I guess James was like, no, just, you got to try this. You got to trust me on this. And so what he did is he kept doing this. 5 minutes, come back, go over there, put his stuff in the locker, work out for 5 minutes, do one set, come back home. And what he realized is over time, he started to build this up. And when he was there, he's like, you know what? I'm already here. I've already spent 5 minutes. Why don't I spend like 10 minutes today? And then before you know it, is like 10 minutes is like 15 minutes, and then 15 minutes to 20 minutes. And 20 minutes like, hey, I'll just do the whole workout. And he was there for 30 minutes. And it wasn't the fact of the amount of time that he spent when he was there that built the habit. It was the repetition and the frequency that he did and went through all of those actions. And then after that, he just, guess what? Became the type of person who exercised. It wasn't like he was going to exercise. He was like, hey, I'm just the type of person who does this. This is what I do, right? Think about that. When you get to the point where the things that maybe like you're having difficulty with right now are just the things you do. You just wake up and do that. It happened to me. I mean, for 30 something years, I wasn't the person who was going to the gym, exercising, eating healthy, or anything. And I was trying to like band-aid that by trying different workouts, trying different ways of eating. And I didn't realize it. I had to become the type of person that just exercised regularly. Like that was just a normal part of my life. And when I did that, when I was able to develop those habits by continuing to do it frequency over and over and over again, it just became the type of I'm just like the type of person who goes to do that. Now it's the opposite. If there's a day where I have Crohn's disease like issues and I can't go out and exercise and I can't do those things, I feel terrible because I don't get those habits in that I really want to perform, right? And it's crazy how that changes, but it changes based off of frequency, not time. So even doing something for 5 minutes in the beginning can be a game changer for you when it comes to your habits. All right, chapter number 12 is the law of least effort. So create an environment where doing the right things is as easy as possible. For example, and also the opposite too, is like creating an environment that makes it as hard as possible to do that thing. So if you're somebody who, like, let's say you want to stop watching so much TV. Well, what you can do is if you take your TV, you unplug it and you turn it around, and then you say, I can turn the TV around and plug it in, but only if I know the specific name of the show and how long I'm going to be watching it. Now, here's the thing. We want, as humans, we want things to be as easy as possible. So when we get home and we look over at I don't know why I'm looking over here, but you look over at the TV and it's turned around and it's unplugged, it feels like the most monumental task in the world to go over there and to turn it around and plug it in. But so many people will be like, I'm not going to take the time to do that. And then it'll give you the opportunity of doing something else. And it's crazy when you do that. When you make just a little bit of friction, how much more difficult it actually is for you to do that or for you not to do it. And it just gets you to show up on an entirely different level. This is another way that I was talking about, like getting people involved. We'll talk about social costs in a minute. But like, if you want to make it easier to do the right thing, what if you called up your buddy? Let's say you want to wake up and you want to exercise for like 20 minutes a day. And you called up your buddy and you're like, hey, why don't you meet me at the gym? We'll start going there, Monday through Friday. We'll exercise for 20 minutes. That is going to make it easier for you to get up and go there. Because if it's just you, you'll probably wake up some days and go, I'm not really feeling it. But if you're like, I'm going to let this person down if I don't show up, that is going to make it much easier for you to go, nope, this is just a matter of fact. I've got to go there because he's counting on me and depending on me to be there to exercise, right? I don't want to let him down. And this is a great way of really setting up your environment, okay? All right. Chapter 13, how to stop procrastinating by using the 2-minute rule. He says when you start a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do. So instead of like thinking that you have to read an entire chapter or entire like book, read a page, right? Instead of thinking that you have to do a 45-minute workout, do a 1 or 2 or 3-minute workout. Instead of thinking that you have to spend all of this time and energy, see what happens is our brains are trying to convince us not to do something new. It's trying to convince us to stay in the old pattern, right? And anything that seems too hard, anything that seems too difficult, anything seems that it's going to take way too much time, our brain will be like, no, that's nope, we can't do that. And so instead, what you do is if you program it to say, you know what, I'm not going to read a whole chapter. I'm just going to read a page. What's crazy is when you get to the end of that page, sometimes you stop. But I know a lot of times I'm like, I can't stop. Like, I need to keep reading this book. It's the same thing with this book. I actually got through it really, really quickly. And I've read it like 4 times because I enjoyed it so much. But it starts off by just reading 1 page instead of like holding yourself to the level of I've got to read, 3 chapters every single time I pick up this book, right? And realizing that these small things is what will create those habits for you over long term, all right? Chapter number 14 is how to make good habits inevitable and bad habits impossible. He says, the best way to break a bad habit is to make it impractical to do, to increase the friction until you don't even have the option to act. I know a lot of these things, what he was talking about in the book, talks about like automation, okay? So if like, let's say you want to save money in your account, like your goal this year is to have a certain amount of money saved. Well, what you would do is when you have your paycheck deposited, it automatically takes money out and puts it into a savings account. And that savings account is something that you don't even have access to, right? You don't even have like, it's a different bank, so it doesn't even pop up on your statement. You don't even remember that it exists. And so what happens is you automatically get that sent over here. You don't even think about it until you're like, oh, wait, that's right. I have this thing over here. And by that time, it's built up so much, but it's automatic. It's something that you don't even have to think about. You can set it up once and then kind of forget it. I know one of the things that that he was talking about too, actually, it might have been in a different book, talks about like if you're struggling with social media, you're struggling, like let's say you have a book that you want to write, you have something that you really want to do, but you keep finding yourself like going into social media and like getting sucked in there. How about like you delete the app? Or you change your password, you have somebody else change it for you to a password that they choose, and you tell them like, hey, until I'm not, when I get done with this, then you can give me this password. And maybe it's like something you do on the weekends. These are just all different ways, not saying that you have to do this, but just saying these are different ways of making it super hard for you to get on social media, super hard for you to like skip that workout, makes it super hard for you to do those things that you absolutely don't want to do, right? Because it's not in congruence with your goals. And when you set it up this way, you make it much easier because you're like, oh, I don't even have the app on my phone. Like it's not, I can't even go in there, right? And now what do you have to do? You're like, okay, what am I going to do instead? And you can use this to really help you, to fuel you to take those actions that you want to take, all right? Chapter 15, we're getting close to the end. Chapter 15 is the cardinal rule of behavior change. He said, what is rewarded is repeated. What is punished is avoided. So add a small, immediate reward to good behaviors. So an example for this, he used an example of like purchasing something. So let's say you're the type of person where you go out and you usually will spend like money wherever it is that you go. You make small purchases, but over time it's like a lot of money, right? Well, instead, when you go out, if you decide that, you know what, I'm not going to make a purchase this time, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that money and I'm going to move it somewhere else so that later down the line, I can make a bigger purchase towards something that I really want. And so what you can do is setting yourself up that way of saying, you know what, I'm going to give myself a reward by not doing this right now so that I can take this small amount and make it into a bigger amount. It's something I'm trying to teach my kids, by the way, because they get $5, not my son, my daughter. She gets $5 and she's like, Daddy, can I spend it? I'm like, well, you haven't even like thought about what you're spending it on. She's like, oh no, this new thing just popped up on my phone and I want to buy it, right? She's like instant gratification, as opposed to saying, how about we take those $5 here, $5 here, put them all together and get you, I don't know, like a really awesome drawing kit or something like that you couldn't get for $5, right? And if you do that, you get to reward yourself from actually saving, right? You get to reward yourself by going, you know what, I'm going to buy this bigger thing next week. And that's how you can make those small, immediate rewards for good behaviors. I also know that this is something that is powerful as a leader, is like what gets rewarded gets repeated, right? So what you bring up in terms of, you know, if you see people taking actions that you want them to take, you see people doing things that like prove that they're incredible leaders, you see things that you want to recognize somebody for, if you recognize them, then it's going to make them more likely of doing those things in the future. And the great thing is when you're doing this for everybody, like you're doing it in front of everybody, you're recognizing somebody in front of everybody, it proves, or not proves, but it makes everybody else feel like, I want to do that too, because I want to get that recognition as well, right? So the same idea of like what gets recognized gets repeated for ourselves. It's the same thing that happens for people on the outside too. All right, number 16 is how to stick with good habits every day. It's tracking, guys. It's tracking. Like he dives into a little bit more detail in here, but really it's tracking the things that you want to do. So tracking the habits that you know you want to take that are going to create the goal or create the thing that you're after, right? Not tracking it in a way that you're going to beat yourself up if you don't stay true to it, but tracking it in a way that if you have no idea the habits that you're taking or not taking, you have no idea how to improve it, you have no idea how to get better over time. Remember, our outward success is a reflection of our inner growth. We need to grow in order to become the type of person who does this automatically. And how we do that is we have to reflect on the times it didn't work and the times it did work and figure out like, okay, we're going to keep doing more of this. Oh, and we're going to change something different here. Okay. And how you do that is you track. That's how you stick to good habits. 17 is how an accountability partner can change everything. So when you create what he terms as an accountability contract, you start to put stuff like social cost in there. Social cost is like, I told somebody I'm going to do something. And so I want to do it. I don't want to let them down. And if I do let them down, here's what I'm going to do in response to that. And it's going to be something that I absolutely hate and I refuse to do, right? So I promise that I'm going to put together this presentation. If I don't put together this presentation, I need to spend $1,000 on this charity that I don't want. I know we kind of talked about it earlier, but it's like thinking about ways that you can set yourself up for success. A lot of times, like we will show up more for other people than we will for ourselves. And if that's the case, if you're a first responder like me, that's typically what we do. You can think about like, how can I actually get other people involved to make it so that it pushes me to perform the actions that I want to take? And there's a social cost associated with this if I tell them I'm going to do it and I don't actually show up. All right. So that's how an accountability partner can change everything. 18 is the truth about talent. So align your habits with your natural inclinations and abilities. So what I mean by this is like, or what he means by this is like when you think about your talents, when you think about the things that are like in your strength zone, when you think about the things that are like you're really great with, think about like how you can use those for your benefit. So maybe like the first one, making things visible or invisible, maybe that's something that you know is going to be a really good trigger for you. Maybe it's the habit stacking. Maybe it's like social cost. Maybe it's telling other people on social media. Like whatever that is, whatever you find works best for you, that's how you succeed with habits. It's not thinking that you have to do all of these. It's realizing that there's some that are going to have a little bit more power over you because that is within your strength zone, and then leaning into that as opposed to thinking that you have to do all of this. All right. All right. Number 19 is the Goldilocks rule, how to stay motivated in life and work. What he talked about is humans experience peak performance when working on tasks that are at the edge of their current abilities. So you don't want to just work on things that you normally work on. You want to ask yourself, like, where is the limit and how can I stretch myself a little bit above that on this next task that I'm taking on? And when you do that, it basically makes you feel like you're in this kind of like flow state where you're like excited, you're trying something new, you're a little bit nervous, but at the same time, you're pushing yourself. And when you push yourself to grow, you continually are able to check in so that you know that you're continuing to take those positive actions, those positive habits, and continuing to level them up so that you're not becoming stagnant. Because that's very easy to become stagnant in that type of activity if you're not pushing that threshold for yourself. And so as you're going, just make sure that you realize that you want to push yourself, but you just don't want to push yourself too hard, because if you push yourself way out above that, I mean, he talked a little bit about it. It actually is very demotivating if you do that. But if you're stretching yourself just a little bit, is going to be what you need to really push through that. All right. All right, chapter number 20 is the downside of creating good habits. He says, once a skill is mastered, there can be a decline in performance over time. So how we continue to create mastery is we have habits and we add deliberate practice, meaning we're doing the habits and we're reflecting on the habits. We're still thinking about the habits. We're bringing up like, how can I elevate this habit even more? And it's something that you don't just end on, but you actually continue to level up. I know for me personally, it was like, 20 or 30 minutes in the gym. Then that made it to 30 minutes. And then it made it to like P90X workouts. And then it made it to like all of these other different workouts. And then it made it to like, how can I eat better? And then it made it to like, how do I get better supplements that are more healthy? And then it was like these habits that I was building up over time. And it was not just like feeling complacent. I was performing the habits, but I was also doing that deliberate practice and thinking about what I can do to stretch myself up a little bit to the next level. Not that I started there. It's that I started down here, and you make tweaks along the way. You add these habits in, and then you just completely readjust them as you go. All right, the conclusion, the secret to results that last. So success is not a goal to reach or a finish line to cross. It's a system to improve and an endless process to refine. So the secret is actually to getting results is to looking at your habits, to really like making small improvements over time, continuing to remain consistent, make the habits that you want to do easier, more visible, more rewarding, more awesome, and make the things that you don't want to do invisible, difficult, hard, like social cost kind of stuff, like not rewarding, and then continue to level those up as you go. Now, that being said, there's no I don't want to say end, but there's always like a way that you can continue to improve your habits. And as long as you're consistently growing, as long as you're learning, like what's that next level of habit that you can take on, like even when you get to that level, you'll notice that there's even more higher levels than that that don't require, I want to put this out there, that don't require you to do more. Sometimes it's just like on an entirely different level. Maybe it's you're exercising and now you're thinking of different ways to exercise. Instead of just doing the gym all the time, like, how about doing some stretching or some yoga or some running or some of this? And it doesn't take you any more time, but it gets you to think about things a little differently so that you can continue to level up. All right, guys, that was the book. If you haven't got a copy, definitely grab one. Atomic Habits, James Clear. I literally went through it like in 44 minutes. This was like a blast crash course, and I didn't even go into a lot of the details of the chapters. This is a very, very powerful book. If you're somebody who's struggling with habits, this is definitely one to or to dive into. Now, you might get to this point where you're like, hey, you know what? I'm starting to build habits, but how do I stay consistent and motivated and on track with those habits? If that's the case, I will leave up a playlist for my leadership motivation for people who want to continue to get after it every single day. You can watch those different playlists. You can watch those videos on repeat if that's something that you want to do, but it'll get yourself to be motivated, to be inspired, and to go out there and to take those actions that you know you want to take. All right, guys, thank you so much for being here. Those of you who are live and those who are on the replay, I appreciate you, and I will see you